Hello and welcome back to another episode of Farewell Evangelion, the Neon Genesis Evangelion podcast where we go through the series bit by bit. My name is Keith, going through for his last time, and as always I'm joined by Peter.
Hey.
Who's going through for his first. So, today we didn't go through any specific volumes or content, we're actually doing a recap on the manga series itself. So I guess, how was your prediction?
Spot on. I correctly predicted that we would do the thing we had priorly discussed we would do.
Yeah. So, no real structure going through, I guess, in a chronological way of the manga. Just a general recap of the whole manga series as a whole, and then probably some light comparisons to the other two main storylines, which would be the rebuild and the anime.
Yeah. So, let me tell you all a story about how my life got flipped twisted. Oh, no, fuck, I already forgot the lyrics, and that's just going to be embarrassing if I try to go further. It is, for the most part, a similar plot to the original Neon Genesis anime, but with sprinkles of difference sprinkled in, and then those sprinkles slowly grow into big differences.
And ultimately, the manga is the reason that the whole idea of the loop theory, or like multiple universes theory, started, because of the differences into the original, even though the anime finished a good almost 20 years before the manga finished.
Yeah, but just like, it's one of those things, this is a terrible reference to make, but I'm going to stick with it. If you've watched the movie Pulp Fiction, the movie both opens and ends with the same scene from different perspectives of a couple robbing a diner.
Yeah.
But one of the lines that the woman says when she starts robbing the diner is slightly different in the opening and in the end, and people like point out like they're separate timelines. It has no impact on that movie at all, but it's just, you tell the same story with subtle differences and people are immediately going to jump to separate timelines or loops or something like that. So it makes sense that the differences that appeared in this would lead to people say there's different timelines, or there's loops, or there's a multiverse or something like that.
Yeah.
Trying to justify why we're telling the story, but different each time.
Exactly. Where most times it would just be, oh, it's a reimagining of the story, and then as we ended up getting in Thrice Upon a Time, it didn't specifically say, yes, loops or timelines are a thing, but it heavily suggests one of them has to be.
Yeah. There is something fucky going on here. Something has to be canonical, and it is no longer canonical. Well, it's still canonical in that it happened, but it's no longer canonical in that it will stop happening from this point on.
Yeah.
No more new Ava content. I don't care if you really enjoy that cool, hip, new Ava podcast that's almost at 100 episodes now with two very charismatic people. Too bad, Rebuilds had no more Ava content, so it's not happening anymore.
Yeah, this is all imaginary. It's not going up.
I mean, it might not be imaginary, but it's definitely not canonical, that's for sure. So, I don't know, do we want to maybe start with talking about how some of the character differences? Because, like, it is largely the same characters, but there are, like, little differences in their personalities and how they play out.
Yeah, and I guess to start off, we can go through, like, where some of the changes happened. So, right off the bat, we know that Ethereal Ray doesn't appear at the beginning.
Yep, that's a big one.
Although Ray isn't, like, that she's not present in the scene anymore, because now, instead of Ethereal Ray being there, we have someone piloting Ava 1 that we later find out was Ray, fighting the Angel above Misato and Shinji as they're trying to get to Nerve.
Yeah, which is an interesting difference, because in the original anime, the reason that she's not already piloting Unit 1 and fighting against the Angel is because of the fact that she's still injured from the test run in Unit 0 way back in the past. Flashback? That's the word, flashback? But in this time, she presumably wasn't injured as badly and is able to pilot, or Gendo's more willing to sacrifice an injured Ray and gets her to pilot. So she is capable of piloting at this point, but gets further injured in her initial fight with Angel, and that's why Shinji ends up having this time.
Yeah. Now, the funny thing about this is we know the specific reason that Ray was in this fight, and that's because the manga came out before the anime did.
Yeah.
And the manga was the closest thing to the original proposal of Neon Genesis, essentially. Because of that, and they ended up scrapping some things and make some changes when the anime finally did come out. So in the original storyboards, it was always supposed to have Ray fighting the Angel for that opening scene, not just the, use of the N2 mines to try to destroy it by the JSSDF.
Yep.
So that's always been the case, but in the original concept, she was fighting it in Unit 0, not Unit 1.
Yeah, it was also, from my understanding, if you go even further back in the planning phase, and this is definitely chopped off at the knees before it ever got to this point of storyboarding, but Anna's original plan was to have this be a female-led story, and have someone kind of like Asuka actually be the protagonist.
Well, the character would have still been like Shinji, but female.
Artistically, like some of his earlier sketches involved a character who looked like Asuka.
Yeah.
And then it ended up not doing that because they wanted someone boys could relate to. I get that because I relate to Asuka. I mean, Shinji. Obviously Shinji. I relate to Shinji. I don't relate to Shinji. He fucking sucks, man.
Yeah. Although the manga version is a bit better, which kind of leads us into the second big change that becomes apparent pretty early in that Shinji acts more like your standard mecha manga pilot.
He is more proactive in the things he does in this one. In the original anime, Shinji was a very reactive character in that his behavior was very much like a leaf on a river where it just kind of like did whatever the flow dictated.
Yeah.
And then would occasionally react to events as they evolved. But this Shinji seems to be a lot more taking steps of his own free will and volition to try and prevent stuff or ensure stuff happens.
Yeah, a way I've heard it explained that I thought was really good is this Shinji is, not that he's not introspective, but he's a lot less introspective about every specific thing compared to the anime, where the slightest thing happened and Shinji goes into like, a dissection of the world and what this means in the grand scheme of things. And then this is Shinji's like, well, that sucks.
Oh well. But yeah, the original Shinji was very much so, oh no, I fought and killed an angel. What does this mean about life now? How has my life changed because of this revelation?
So because of that, this Shinji does also come off as a bit more impulsive.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a key feature of any of those like shonen mecha anime pilots.
Yeah, they're definitely a little bit more fire from the hip.
And we end up seeing a bit more of a reflection of his past in the manga as well, whereas in the anime, we just got a brief with the family. He doesn't want to go back. And this one, we get to see the flashbacks and actual moments that kind of define his character to like wrap it up a bit.
Also, I could be misremembered, but isn't this also the one where he had the shortest amount of time with his family, where it was only like a couple of years this time? Whereas in the anime it was like 10 years or something?
So the anime and the manga seem to both be he was with the relatives as soon as his mother disappeared, died, whatever.
I'm thinking Rebuild.
Rebuild's
the one where they have a much shorter time.
Where it was about like 4 years apart.
Yeah.
Another one is kind of talking about another character that we see has some changes to them that becomes apparent pretty early on. Is Rey's a lot less doll-like, is the best way to put it. She has more animated aspects to it.
She is more of a person in this one than in the anime, that's for sure.
Yeah, the big one I can think of is when Shinji first goes to replace Struff with the ID, and she's there having that like, T, how do I make, like, you see the normal, like, Rey in the anime just, like, doesn't give a fuck that Shinji's there. Like, there's no social norms or anything, she's not worried about anything, she just leaves and goes to school. Whereas this Rey is like, fuck, like, I make tea for people when they come over, right?
Yeah, is tea a thing I'm supposed to make for you? How do you make tea?
How many leaves do I put in this cup?
Exactly how many leaves should I put in? Ah, the boiling water has touched my hand. What do now, Shinji?
Yeah, she seems more animated with at least like a piece of personality and not just a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Which I feel like leads a bit better into the relationship between Shinji and Rei as depicted in the manga. Because in the anime, her at the end being like, no, Shinji's the one that I need to do instrumentality with, is like, okay, she like just glomped onto him effectively. Whereas in the manga, it makes more sense that would be like, because Gendo was pretty much doing the same thing Shinji was doing in the anime.
Yeah.
So why is Shinji the one that she decides to go to?
Yeah.
But in this one, Shinji is doing the same thing, but showing it with kindness and not just a "I need you" type thing.
Yeah, and then additionally, they do a better job of showing her developing a relationship, even if it gets kind of erased with the Rei 3 situation. Like
it had that impact that she remembered, which makes more sense than the anime one does.
Yeah, we have that whole foreshadowing scene of her like calling Shinji out to this weird fountain water feature thing, and being like, "Hey, Shinji, I want to hold your hand. Like, not to sound weird or creepy, but I want to hold your hand. Can I hold your hand? And that kind of sets up that little bit at the end where she's finally like, you know, Gendo, your weird, gross atom hand, that's not the hand I want to hold right now.
I'll take the atom, but your hand can stay.
Your hand stays here. I want to hold Shinji's hand. Nice little bit of foreshadowing.
And then with Asuka's character, the big one is she probably has the least change, but it's still a change of Asuka comes off as superior throughout the whole anime.
Yeah.
But in the manga, she comes off more as childish, pretending to be, which I feel does a much better job for getting the trauma she later goes through across.
Yeah.
Because in the anime it comes off as she's perfect, but she hits a wall. Whereas this one is, in the manga, it feels more that she was putting on this like facade for so long that when she couldn't keep it up anymore, that's where her break happens, which I feel like does a little bit better narratively. Like, oh, she was pretending for too long and wasn't able to deal with a problem correctly.
Yeah, she never actually learned how to cope like a more mature person.
Yeah. Not to say that she doesn't have any skill. Like, she's still, you know, university graduate in the military, trained to be a naval pilot from a young age. She's still very skilled, but she's still childish, and that's not a debatable thing. She's putting it like she thinks she needs to behave in a more mature way, but she can't help it.
Yeah. Speaking of children who are different, Kaoru's fucking weird in this one compared to the others.
Yeah.
Which I think is what leads to a lot of people suggesting this is the first loop, is because Kaoru is, I would say he is intrigued or curious about Shinji, but it is less so like all of the other ones where he seems almost obsessed with Shinji, and more so just like he is keeping tabs on Shinji in this one.
Yeah, like his mission is to like, hey, make sure the third child stays in check.
Yeah. Hey, while you're at it, kill a cat in front of the third child. See how he reacts to it. So we just have more data.
Yeah.
So Kaoru is a lot more. Initially, he seems a lot more apathetic towards Shinji, and then very quickly that swaps, and he becomes a lot more like frustrated with Shinji about the fact that Shinji doesn't immediately see him as a best friend. And then by the end, we see kind of Kaoru, I think in those last couple of moments, seems to show that level of obsession with Shinji that we expect from him in other versions.
Yeah.
But yeah, he starts out significantly different from any of the other characters.
Yeah, and that's something I think nothing's been ever fully confirmed on this, but it does get talked about, especially with the earlier volumes, that a lot of the stuff used were scrapped ideas that were removed from the anime for one reason or another, and they couldn't do it, they didn't have the time for it, or the story ended up going in a different direction to a degree.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the stuff that we see is leftover stuff that they still want to use something back. It's like, oh, we can use it here.
Yeah.
And I think that was supposed to be with Kaoru, because obviously a lot of plot had to have been scrapped with Kaoru concept-wise, because he's only there for like half an episode in the anime.
Yeah, whereas in the manga he's there for a couple volumes.
Yeah.
And then he's very suddenly and aggressively not there anymore.
Yeah. Which is another interesting thing, because he also doesn't show up during instrumentality at all, which he ends up doing in the movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kaoru just got dunked on, I guess.
The death was more finite in this version.
Yeah.
And for the antagonist of the series, or one of them, Gendo, I love that he just seems more like aggressively, openly villainous in this version.
Yeah, I think in all the other versions, it takes a bit of realization to realize Gendo's actually one of the villains. He's, at least in my opinion in the anime, portrayed a lot more like...
He's only an antagonist to Shinji because Shinji wants the infection.
Yeah.
And not so much, oh, he's planning something evil.
Yeah, he's not openly an antagonist, he's just antagonistic towards Shinji. And even then, he's not, like, aggressive with Shinji, he's just not giving Shinji the affection that he wants.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, not only is he more overtly not comforting Shinji, like, we have that line from one of the last volumes, where he says, I never loved you, all I've ever thought of you is the thing that took Yui's love away. And yeah, that's probably not true, that might be just how he's rationalizing it in his head, because he has a hard time dealing with the fact that Yui's dead. Whatever. I don't think we would have gotten that in the other versions. I don't think Gendo was ever that overt with his feelings towards Shinji.
Yeah, and that's I think it's also kind of, in the anime, Gendo seemed to keep his real thoughts and emotions in check better.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, we do see him slip sometimes.
For sure.
Whether that be he slips on, clearly loses his temper at somebody, or even, like, he just hits, like, a wave of sadness because, like, you know, he brilliantly thought of Yui during a mission.
Yeah. And then, yeah, we also have his scheming coming across a lot more as not him plotting to save humanity from... Because that's how it came across a lot in the early parts of the anime, was he was scheming against SEELE, but it felt like he was doing it for the greater good or to stop SEELE from fucking over the planet.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, it is much more apparent that the reason he's fucking with SEELE is because he has his own way he wants to fuck over humanity.
I'm gonna kill God.
Yeah. I have my own designs, and they are more important than humanity or your designs for humanity.
Yeah. Because SEELE almost comes off as, like, not doing it in spite of humanity, but doing it to, like, do the next step of evolution. So SEELE starts coming off as, like, less villainous than Gendo almost.
Yeah. Gendo wants to do it to get Yui back and for no other reason. SEELE at least has the guise of, I'm doing this to further the evolution of humanity.
Yeah. Well, we even get a bit more of them at the end there when Shinji ends up activating himself as the vessel. They're not like, ah shit, Shinji's the vessel. The plan's failed. It's like, if this is what God has determined, then Shinji will be the vessel.
Yeah. Yeah, alright, we didn't actually put all of our chips into a single basket, so I guess this is the basket that now holds all of our chips. All other baskets have been destroyed.
Yeah. Another one, and this is kind of building on the stories, we get a Pen backstory, which isn't present in the anime. He's just kind of there, and it's a pet that Misato has.
Never really explained, but...
Yeah, but that's when we find out he was an experiment of Coherent.
Yeah, an experiment that they were going to exterminate and remove all evidence, and she was like, no, I'm gonna go against them because it deserves to live. Shinji maybe, but Pen absolutely deserves to live.
And this ends up, I find, kind of helping with, like, the growth of the relationship between Misato and Shinji and, like, just explaining where they kind of stand on things, right?
Yeah.
Because this is, doesn't work for them bonding because it's Misato actually opening up with something to Shinji. We also kind of get an idea of, like, why she was willing to let Shinji live with her.
Yeah. Why she intervened when she saw Shinji was going to be living on his own. And she immediately realized, that's not okay. I should intervene. Shinji reminds me of Pen.
Yeah. And it also, in a way, kind of makes the Shinji leaving scene better, too. Because another change is the reason why Shinji wants to leave the first time. Because in the original anime, it's more so that he feels like they're using him, but we as the audience know it's not the case, because Misato actually generally seems to care about Shinji's well-being. But in this version, where their personalities are different and they don't seem to really be clicking, and she's not sure how to balance that, I'm your caregiver and your commanding officer, and then Shinji finds the book that she's watching and seeing all these bad things happen and do nothing, and that's why he's like, fuck it, I don't want to deal with any of this.
Yeah, he has a lot more concrete evidence of, oh, she's just using me to fight in.
Yeah, which kind of requires her to give that Pen backstory. So it's the result of another good change.
Yeah.
That kind of flushes out the characters.
And that's one of the things I will say is, from my perspective, pretty much every change, and I think we talked about this over the course of the series while we were talking about the little changes, every single one of the changes feels like it's for the best when compared to the anime, because every single one of the changes feels like it gives better justification to some of the actions that seemed a little bit weird in the anime, and now it seems like, oh, it makes sense why Shinji was running away. Initially, he was just, like, accusing them of using him, and, like, yes, he's a soldier.
It was a level of paranoia, almost, it felt like,
yeah.
Shinji originally.
Whereas this time, it's not so much paranoia, and it's more so, he was given explicit evidence, they're just taking advantage of it.
Which, ultimately, I think, fixes the thing, because one of the big complaints about Shinji in the original is he's very annoying.
Yes.
Because he makes all these accusations, but, like, people are telling him that's not the case, but there's nothing to state that his side of things that he feels is happening is correct, is fully correct.
Yeah. We
do see some instances where he is making the correct call, but again, he's not really doing anything with it, but it's because of the change to Shinji being more proactive, or, I guess, braver, in a sense, is probably a better way to put it. He finds things and then reacts to those things that he finds as evidence, and not just kind of like the intrusive thoughts.
Yes. It's not just him thinking, oh, they're just using me, and then spending the next 3 episodes dealing with the fact that, oh, they're just using me, and it's more so him thinking, I wonder if they're using me, and then finding a book entitled How We're Using Shinji, and then being like, oh, so they are in fact using me.
Best way is to watch Toji beat the shit out of Shinji and not intervene.
Make sure when Shinji's being beaten, laugh, point, but don't stop. Yeah, that is definitely a change for the better. At least in my mind. Speaking of other important changes, now that you've mentioned him, Toji fucking dies.
Yeah. And Toji, I feel like they increased the spectrum on him in a sense. Yeah. Because I find he's a lot more aggressive in the manga. But then he also, we see, because in the anime, he just seems, oh, I'm angry at you for this one specific thing. And then it kind of fixes itself.
Yeah.
Whereas the Toji in the manga seems to have, there's a lot more going on with Toji. And his anger is an outlet to try to cope with it. And, like, the character gets built up more. That, like, ends up, feeling legitimate fear in front of Shinji. And, like, he has a breakdown almost.
Yeah, and
where the anime Toji, I don't think would have done that.
No. I think there's a couple key differences with Toji. And it's kind of what we've already been talking about, where they get more justification, stuff like that. But, like, in the anime, Toji gets real aggressive with Shinji, and then while watching Shinji fight against Samshell? Was that the one?
Yeah, Samshell.
Yeah. Kensuke is like, hey, look at him up there fighting for the city. That's probably what happened with your sister. It doesn't look like he has a lot of control right now. Probably not his fault that he hurt your sister. And Toji's gonna be like, you know what, you're right. Shinji's a good guy. Whereas
I made a misunderstanding, and I want to make it better.
Whereas in the manga, it doesn't seem like Toji, like, turns around and, like, accepts that, like, he's got to stop being mad at Shinji until Shinji, like, talks to him that one time on the roof, and he's like, if you have to, throw me off the fucking roof, but then we're done with this. I can't keep dealing with your aggression.
If you're gonna kill me, make sure you do it with the first shot.
Yeah.
And Toji's like, fuck, I don't want to deal with this kid.
And then we also get what I think was a significantly better change in this one is in the anime when Toji is, like, tapped to be the 4th child. We have that whole conversation. Well, we don't even really have a conversation in the anime. We end up just kind of seeing him, like, think about it a lot, but we don't really see him puzzle.
We get scenes with him in silence, doing, like, activities like playing basketball, sitting in the back of the classroom. Like, oh, he's thinking about something, but we don't really get that insight, which, as you said, we do in the manga. But also, Shinji never finds out until after the fact.
Yeah, whereas in the anime, or not in the anime, in the manga, not only does Shinji find out about it beforehand, Toji even, like, has a whole ass conversation with him where he's like, I'm really terrified to do this, but I feel like I have to help my sister.
Yeah.
And, like, it gives a lot better justification of, like, what's going on with Toji during those scenes.
Yeah, and it's the thing, like, Toji is far more impulsive than Shinji, so obviously his first knee-jerk reaction is, I should talk to Shinji about this.
Yeah, of course. I should talk to the prof. He knows stuff.
The prof knows!
Yeah.
And kind of in that same vein, there's less angels in the manga version as well.
Yeah, they cut out a couple.
Yeah, which some of them's upsetting because there's some really cool concepts that just didn't show up in the manga version, which were in the anime. But one of the big changes for the angels that do stick around is Gaegil, they're not even present for as well.
Yeah.
Asuka defeats it completely off screen.
Yeah. Some are for the best that they're gone, though. Like that one that lives at the bottom of the volcano. Fuck them. I don't care about that angel.
The Magma Diver episode, yeah.
Yeah. I am perfectly fine with that.
Yeah. Sandalphon, it was one thing, interesting concept, but it felt out, like, of the main story in the anime.
Yeah, it felt like it didn't really serve a purpose to the story to have it happen. Other than, like, in the anime, it's the, like, first time that Shinji and Asuka ever cooperate on anything. I suppose that's what it was meant to do in the anime, but it just feels unnecessary.
Yeah, and the manga does a better job of setting up the Israfel fight for being that one where they have to be in sync to defeat it.
Yeah, exactly.
Ifril, the one of Fear, the one that corrupts and starts taking over the Magi system, isn't in the manga, which is probably the one, if I was upset any of them were cut, it was that one.
Yeah, I feel like that one is a bit of a loss to have it, because instead of having that be the scene where we learn about the Magi system and learn about the mother, the scientist, and the woman, instead we kind of learn more about the Magi system when SEELE starts hacking into the fucking Nerve HQ.
Yeah, because in the anime it played it off more that, oh, maybe someone did something when it was down to, like, you know, get the information.
Yeah.
Another one in the manga, and minor change to Kensuke, but Kensuke seems attracted to Asuka right off the bat.
Yeah, he fully accepts it right away.
Yeah. And kind of in line with that Yagil thing, too. The introduction, as we mentioned in the manga, of Asuka and the Eva 2 pilot as two separate entities.
Yeah.
I feel does a much better job of setting up what Asuka's deal is, too. Nothing but praise for this amazing Eva 2 pilot that was taking down Angel by themselves completely and didn't have to, you know, go berserk to do it. And then, oh, there's this girl playing an arcade machine, and she beats the fuck out of a bunch of guys.
Yeah, there's a foul-mouthed girl playing games in an arcade who also assaults adult men. That's a very different presentation from what we got of the introduction of the second child.
Also, I guess we should mention, but the angels that aren't present in the manga, Sandalphon, Magma Diver.
Yep.
Madriel, the Eye Spider.
Thank God for that. That one was... No loss there!
Uriel, which is the one that was kind of like a nano virus.
Yep.
And Leliel, which I think might actually be the bigger loss.
Yeah, I can accept.
But I feel like story-wise, it's hard to put Shinji in the position he was in the anime to have the Uriel situation.
Yeah, the thing about that one is it provides a lot of context for Angels and for Shinji as well in the anime. But the whole reason it works so well is because, as we joked at the time, we were dealing with Big Dick Shinji at that time. Where, like, this was a Shinji who had no personality. Well, not no personality, but he had no initiative to begin with.
Exactly.
And then watching him, like, the moment he does have that initiative, immediately gets smacked back down to Earth. Whereas that's not the Shinji we had in the manga, so it does feel like a bit of a loss, but it also doesn't feel like it would have fit very well in the manga. At least if you ask me.
Yeah. Two characters that get a big glow up, I guess, for the anime or the manga is Cavalry Force.
Yep.
He does show up earlier and gets to stick around a bit more. But I think Kaji also gets a lot more added to his character in the manga that wasn't really present. Like, he's a more active front and center player, whereas most of the Kaji stuff is just seeing him in the background, like, trying to look nonchalant is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we already talked about Cavalry. Kaji gets a lot more of that growth to him. Or not growth, not even growth, because his character doesn't really change over the series. But just, he gets a lot more of a developed character, and we learn more about him. Another character I would argue we get a lot more of in the manga than we did the anime, even though they're not technically a major character on screen regularly. Yui. We get to learn a lot more about Yui, and, like, the fact that she knew she was going to be Eva Soup from that moment onwards, and did it intentionally so that she could help Shinji in the future when he piloted Unit 1.
Yeah, she's still one of the franchise's bigger mystery characters that we don't know a lot about. But yeah, she definitely does feel more, her presence is felt more in the manga compared to the anime, where it's just really Able 1, and hints of Yui here and there, with the biggest thing being she shows up at the end of the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
But this one, she's a very clear presence throughout the whole series.
Yeah, she's present from the first time Shinji gets inside the Eva, and it's much more obvious that it's Yui's spirit inside of the Eva when they have that little bit of foreshadowing where Shinji calls out for his mother, and then sees a flash of a woman cloaked in white. Yeah, a lot more Yui.
Yeah.
Not even like more Yui as a character, but just like more of it explaining that Yui is inside Unit 1, even if they're not explicitly saying those words, and also more of Yui's backstory before she was inside the
Yeah, and I guess the thing with both the anime and the manga do, where they never really give you the direct answers for most of the stuff, but the manga does a lot better job of, we're not going to give you an answer, but here's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Which they tend to do through showing and not telling, which is always great.
Yeah, here's a lot of information, you put it together in whatever order you want, make conclusions about it.
Yeah, because most of that Yui stuff in the anime came from the lore dump from Ritsuko in the Ray Chamber, which was near the end. which really, it just boiled down to, this is where your mom disappeared, this is where Ray first appeared, Ava 1 was made here, and then this one, we had the build-up so that when that information came up, for a first-time person, I would say that, oh, that connects the dots right there, I figured out what's going on.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, which I think ends up being one of the key catalysts to the big change at the end for instrumentality trigger, is in the anime version, Shinji doesn't really learn his desire or need for human interaction until instrumentality happens.
Yeah.
But in the manga, when it's happening, is as soon as Shinji kills Kaoru, that's when he kind of acknowledges it.
Yeah,
so
that's
he
when he
kind of
realizes...
solved the problem beforehand.
Yeah, so... And that's kind of what's different is, in instrumentality in the anime, Shinji's kind of given everything he ever wanted in the form of, he now has that world without human interaction where everyone's in soup together. And then he has to, like, spend time there before realizing this isn't what I actually want. And then learns that over time. Whereas in this one, as you said, once Kaoru's gone, Shinji starts to realize there's no one left. And even when Kaoru's the only one left, Shinji starts to realize, like, I have no one I can go to except for Kaoru now. And
he picks Kaoru specifically because Kaoru is not going to be upset Ray's dead. So he's like, fuck it, I'll rely on Kaoru.
Yeah. And then once Kaoru's gone, he realizes there's no one left except for Asuka in a comatose form on a fucking hospital bed, and realizes he has none of that human interaction. So by the time instrumentality comes around, Emery's like, this is the world you always wanted. And she's just like, no, this is the world I wanted at one point in time, but I have long since stopped wanting this. I want human interaction.
Well, the fun thing is, I would even say that it's the reason Shinji ends up trying to fight to save Asuka, not just because Misato is like, hey, you need to do this, but Shinji at this point realizes the importance of having others around that you care for.
Yeah.
And Asuka pretty much ends up becoming that last person, and I think if Asuka would have died, we probably would have seen a close to the same triggering scenario as happened in the end of Evangelion, because he truly would have lost everyone at that point.
He would have not seen the value anymore because there would have been no one left to connect.
But Kaoru was already in the anime at that point beforehand and didn't care about anything because he didn't realize how important that connection was, which is ultimately where him fighting to save Asuka and defeat the MPs and ends up triggering Third Impact because he's like, give me everything you got so I can protect everybody.
Yeah.
So he ends up, as we mentioned during the episode where we talked about the ending of the manga version is literally a trigger of, I want to protect everyone, whereas the other one is everyone go away.
Yeah. It's what we said during that episode where Shinji's just like, I want the people I care about to stop fucking dying.
Yeah.
I will literally destroy the world if that's what it takes to stop people from dying.
Yeah.
And he almost does.
Mm-hmm.
Way to go, Shinji. Big dubs for the Shinji man. I'm never calling him the Shinji man again. That was awful. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all the fans of this podcast who are no longer fans because I just said that. I don't blame you.
And then we get a bunch of more specific endings that are a bit more apparent, or not endings, but changes near the ending that are more apparent, such as we see Gendo in play with angel powers.
Yep.
He's also the one who saved Shinji from the JSSDF.
Yep.
And Misato's more of just an escort. And that episode I also mentioned that I do like this one better. If they would have done this in anime, that would have been great because I like the idea of Shinji having dueling ideas on what should be happening with instrumentality at the end, as opposed to just not giving a shit about anything.
Well, to be fair, this goes back to the whole Shinji thing is, like, the Shinji in this world where he's proactive kind of needs to be presented with options so he can actively make a choice, whereas the Shinji in that world, given how reactive and how unwilling to, like, do things of his own volition, I feel like if he had been presented with multiple choices of instrumentality, he probably wouldn't have made a choice. And honestly, might have ended up just going with Gendo because Gendo was the first one to say, come with me, kill God. And he just been like, alright, fine, let's go kill God. Like, I feel like that's where it would have ended up going if that had happened.
A very different outcome.
Yeah. Just, fine, okay, let's go kill God.
And this one's not really a change, but more of the manga was mainly handled by Sadamoto.
Yep.
Obviously, he was a big part in the creation of the anime too, but he got a lot more free reign to do things, and most of it was on his approval as well. But he had his own ideas to the mangas that went on. And one thing he made clear from the beginning, or at least when asked about it, was he kind of had a different impression on what Ray and Cow were served in the story. And when I say them, you're like, oh, okay, I can see how that is definitely different from the anime to the manga, where Ray was supposed to be more of, in the anime or the manga, the idea of motherly attachment.
Yeah.
There was not like a romantic, loving thing. It was more of a kind nurturing, with where he thought Ray was supposed to represent. So when you look at the interactions, none of them really have that romantic feel to them.
Yeah.
Which we see a bit of in the Rebuild series.
Yeah, Shinji's... I don't know. Shinji's interactions with Ray in the anime definitely come across a lot more romantic-based. Even if he's not being overtly romantic, it seems like that's at the core of his actions.
Shinji in the anime has like a sexual like attraction to a lot of the female characters as well,
yeah.
which plays the ending story. But this one, not so much. It's more of that like caring, nurturing.
Yeah, exactly. He still feels... I don't want to use the word attraction, but I can't think of a better one. But it's not a sexual attraction. It's just he feels compelled to interact with her because of that like nurturing thing.
Exactly. Kind of like what he's missing.
Yeah.
And then Kaoru, on the other hand, is supposed to be an ideal, in a sense. So he describes it kind of like when you're going to school and there's another student that you're really impressed by, and you kind of want to be like them. And Kaoru is supposed to fill that role for Shinji's development in the story.
I don't know what that's like. I was always the most impressive student in every classroom.
You're the Kaoru!
I was Kaoru, of course.
But that when you look at it with the manga series, it's like, okay, yeah, Kaoru showing up does have like a really big impression on Shinji, and Shinji goes through a big change personality-wise because of his interaction with Kaoru.
Yeah.
Because I guess Kaoru ends up showing him alternatives is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Because Kaoru does have a
Choices.
very different outlook on things compared to all of the other characters that are present.
Yeah.
And Kaoru will do the things that Shinji has even like thought about but not wanted to.
Yeah, it's like really obvious in... I don't keep bringing it up, but the fucking cat killing scene of like... So far Shinji's whole impression has been like, every life needs to be saved, everything needs to be maintained as much as possible. Whereas Kaoru brings up the argument, like, I fucking hate this thing, but like, the thought experiment that people have about like, utilitarianism or something like that, like all those different like world views and moralities that you could base your life around. Essentially, Kaoru gives them the alternative answer to the trolley problem of everyone else would be like, no, don't hit the switch, you can't take a life or whatever. Whereas Kaoru's like, of course you pull the switch, less people die that way, you're reducing suffering. Like, yes, save lives, but like, don't just prolong a life for the sake of prolonging a life. If the life's only going to be filled with suffering, crush that kitty to death with your bare hands. Come on, man, it's simple.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that's in animes that we've seen. That's definitely like a recurring concept of like, is that the right thing to do? And thinking about it, I love how the Fate series does pretty much the polar opposite, because the character Kiritsugu is like very much full on board. That's the mentality. But then you realize like, shit, at the end, there's like even less people because I've killed more people than needed to be killed because of this.
Yeah.
I kept killing 30% each time.
Yeah.
So I guess the outcome is there is no correct answer.
Yeah, and that's... I feel like that's kind of what Kaoru's pointing out is... I mean, not necessarily. Kaoru is obviously making the argument of kill the thing, end its suffering. But what Kaoru's character represents is these aren't easy choices. There is a perspective where killing a kitten with your bare hands is the ethical thing to do.
Well, that and Kaoru is kind of like a pure logic almost in a sense until the Armor Cell fight, when he kind of gets the heart from Rei in a sense.
Yeah.
Once they have their mind meld thing going on.
Yeah, so it's just, that's kind of how I feel, not Kaoru as a character, but what his impact on the story is less so about what he teaches Shinji, and more so just the fact that he points out the fact that there's not always a right answer, there's different answers that could be interpreted as right.
Yeah.
So Shinji should go kill cats, just for fun. I think if it's for fun, it's definitely bad. If you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment, then it's automatically on the bad side. But if you justify your enjoyment by saying you're doing it to reduce suffering,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Now, another thing, moving on to a different topic here. There were some character changes that did happen between the versions, which are... some people might say, oh, they made errors when they were doing it. But no, this is the version of it. And again, tying into the fact that multiple timelines or looping theory or whatever is correct in some aspect. Shinji, in the anime, was staying with the sensei, with no defined familiar ties to anyone. Yeah,
there's no familial relationship. All it really seemed like was a dude who taught him how to play the cello, and that was their entire relationship.
I mean, Gendo dropped Shinji off at cello practice one day and just never came back.
Yeah.
Shinji's like, I guess I live here now.
Oh, cool. Cello teacher was not on board at first. Or by the end. But,
No.
Didn't have the guts to kick Shinji out.
Yep. Whereas in the manga, we find that he was staying with Yui's family.
Yeah.
Both of them, same time frame. Yui dies and he was left. But, yeah, he was left with family versus he was left with just random sensei.
A generic sensei.
Now, we never get a confirmation on how they're Yui's family, but common speculation is it's probably Yui's sister.
Probably.
Asuka, backstory changes, which, honestly, Asuka's probably the one who has the most changes between all iterations.
She has a whole bunch of different plot lines that explain her different character stories.
But in this one, she still has the same father and mother.
Yes.
But she was made in a test tube to spite the father because the mother couldn't handle him choosing another woman.
Yeah, the father and mother tried to have a child. It didn't work out. And so the father married someone else who could give him the child. And the mother was like, you know what, fuck you. We're having a child anyways. Test tube me.
Yeah, and I think, and this is the very interesting thing, I think every time they change Asuka, they do it, not saying a version of Asuka is the superior one, but every time they change her backstory, it changes her character in a way that I feel just makes a lot of sense for the character.
Yeah, the differences in the backstory line up with the differences in the character that we end up getting.
Yeah, because the original version is her mother and father had her naturally, she became sick, and then the father left the mother for another woman. So Asuka is worried that if she doesn't stay out, work up to expectations, she'll be abandoned, like her mother was.
Like her father abandoned her and her mother, yeah.
Yeah. In this manga version, she's a test tube baby that was built to spite somebody. So the mother obviously had a lot of expectations onto her that she needed to be perfect, otherwise, what was the point?
Yeah.
So she had the superiority complex, which builds up where in the manga version of Asuka, she has that very childish nature because she's a child.
Yeah.
But she has that facade that she keeps putting up that is not always the best, but of being the perfect stand-up person. Like, I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And then in the Rebuild series, we kind of dropped the father aspect, and the mother just made her to be a weapon, essentially.
Yeah.
So she doesn't see the reason for having those normal connections. I only have one job, and if I don't do that one job right, what's my point?
Yeah.
Which all end up leading to the same concept that Asuka's struggle always is around, which is why does she exist? Or what is her purpose compared to what she wants and expectations? But it's done in 3 different ways, which I feel like each way was done really well for what they set up.
Yeah, it always works really well with justifying her fight for self-purpose based on the backstory and her origin.
And then the last kind of backstory change is Kaji. Although, where it's classified as a backstory change, but I don't know if I'd classify it that way because we didn't really get a Kaji backstory in other versions.
Yeah, it's not really a change so much as a backstory.
Yes, ultimately it's more of that we get, why he's the way he is. Less so than we changed his backstory.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I will say that I do really enjoy is where the manga series took so long to finish, starting in 94 and going all the way up to 2014.
20 years. Great amount of time for a 14-volume.
Yeah. And you might have caught on to this already, and I know you would know from when I talked about it, but the style of doing manga changed drastically in that time frame. And there's a moment where, I'll give credit, it was a subtle change, but if you look at, say, Volume 1 panels, and then volume 14 panels, worlds apart. Because in the original ones, it was still the hand-drawn stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the characters have, like, the white outlines on the backgrounds because the backgrounds are drawn separately, and then you put the white panel on the characters, so you can just place them wherever you want. Works perfectly, and even, like, character facial reactions. I see it's like, that's a 90s manga. That's an early 2000s manga. But then you look at the later ones, and it's like, okay, this was clearly done digital.
Yeah.
It was just something amusing about, like, I had to go back, and I was like, oh, I never realized this the first time I went through this, because obviously it was at a slower pace. Or even this time we're going through at a faster pace, but it actually was a subtle change that you didn't really pick up on. But it's specifically, like, between 7 to, like, 8 is where that does happen. So Kaji dies, and even the manga panels change.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you have any other changes you want to discuss, but I think we kind of covered most of the changes between the anime and the manga.
Yeah, I would say I'd probably rank this as my favorite iteration of the 3 stories, because I think overall it's probably the one that works the best standalone.
I can agree with that. If you're gonna parcel the original anime with End of Evangelion, I could probably say either one is fine. I would probably still recommend you start with the anime and then go to the manga. I
agree, and it's for a very specific reason. I say anime should always be your first go into it if you can, and that is the ending of the anime. I feel only works to its full potential on your first viewing. Yeah. I feel like if you went through like an End of Evangelion first and then watched the congratulations scene, it would probably be more confusing for some reason.
Yeah, I can accept that. I can also very clearly stand on the side of it was already very confusing.
Oh yeah, but it somehow makes it more confusing. It's like, wait, what's going on? Whereas if you see the anime first and go through that scene, you kind of put together, oh, it's the instrumentality that everyone was talking about.
Yeah. The main reason I would argue for doing anime first and then manga, although I don't disagree with what you just said, it's the same reason I usually argue anytime there's a book adaptation of a movie or a movie adaptation of a book, always see the movie first and then read the book, because it is a frustrating experience going from book to movie, and all of the like little details that you really liked getting cut out and taken away, and nothing to replace them. So like all that little stuff of like Yui's backstory or the explanation that she's in Ava 1, that's a kind of huge reveal in the anime.
Yeah, the anime makes it a much bigger deal than the manga does.
Yeah. If you go from the manga to the anime, you already have all those like fun twists taken away from you, and instead you probably end up like, you still have the changes and the differences that are interesting to you, but it's probably going to be frustrating that like a lot of the like justifications for character behaviors don't make a lot of sense. Like, I'll admit, some of them seemed a little odd to me when I was watching the anime, but they didn't stick out, and like I wasn't hugely focused on a lot of the like unjustified behavior. Whereas now using the anime as comparison, I'm like, wow, it really doesn't make sense that Shinji was running away at first. Like, he didn't have a lot to base his decision to run away on.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, to get the best experience possible, I think you need to go through the anime, End of Evangelion, Rebuild, and the manga, because they all cover each other's bases.
Yeah, exactly. You get the full story between them. It's just, I feel like manga to anime would be the harshest of changes, and like I feel like it would detract from your experience reading watching the anime.
Yeah. Now there was one more thing I wanted to go over before we go over to some of the questions we ended up getting. But the manga art.
Yes.
So the cover art and all that stuff. This one's a lot better than when we were going through the Shinji Ikari Racing project. A lot more variety going on. Any thoughts on any of the covers?
Not specific. I do think the cover art was fucking gorgeous on most of them. None of them like specifically stuck out to me because that's not something I tend to spend a lot of time studying cover art. But I do remember the cover art being really good. That being said, I don't have like specifics that I remember looking at and being like, this is incredible.
I think there's one... No, I would say there's two that kind of, like, in my mind stick out. So there's the cover that has Shinji piloting the Eva,
Okay.
the purple one, if you remember.
Yep.
That one I think is, in my mind, the go-to. That's the manga one. But the other one I always found interesting is the cover of Volume 14, which is Shinji in the snowy area
Yeah,
with the Eva
like
behind him.
after it's over, kind of.
Because that's definitely the one that has like the most, wait, what's going on? Compared to everything else.
Yeah.
Good honorable mention, the Kaoru cover.
Character
With all the
solid.
SEELE monoliths around them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just, every volume did a really good job of letting you know what was going to be the main focus in that those chapters.
I can agree with that.
There was never like, looking at it, it's like, oh, it's just Neon Genesis. It was always, oh, this must be kind of where the story is in this one.
Oh, this one's going to focus a lot on Rei and her relationship to the units.
Yeah. Or even the one where we get the flashback to what happened to his mother. The cover is Fuyutsuki, young Gendo, and Yui.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up the episode of us going over the manga series as a whole. I think overall both of us are of agreement really good.
No.
No?
I don't think it's really good. I think it's great. Sorry.
What
I don't
about
know-
what
I don't know
about
why I had
amazing?
to do that. Oh, no, definitely not amazing. Great at best.
So great at best? Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
But we did get some questions here, kind of to celebrate a few things. We hit over 7,000 followers. We've reached the month where we're in our second year.
Yep.
So we want to also do some questions just because we haven't done this in a while. So let's just pull a few of them from the Instagram page we had. We answered most of these on the Instagram page, but I think we'll end up going into a bit more depth in the ones we can here. So, for a fun one, if you could redo your first Neon Genesis experience, what order are you picking? Manga first, then the OG, then the rebuilds? What is your... Now that we've finished the core three, what would be your watch order if you were doing it over again for the first time?
So, for the actual question, God, how do I phrase this? To answer your question, I hate to fucking admit this, but I think Keith chose the order I would recommend doing it again in. I might swap the manga and rebuild and just do anime manga rebuild, but I would definitely start with the anime, then either go to manga or rebuild, and then end with the other. But the sincere answer is I wouldn't do this. If I was given the option to start over again and never experience this, I would choose to never experience this.
But you wouldn't be like, hey, that's a Neon Genesis Evangelion reference.
Yeah, I wouldn't, and I'd be happier for it.
But yeah, I think a lot of people will agree that the anime should be the first one. And as you specified earlier, it just does a better job of some reveals
Yeah.
that the manga and the rebuilds don't really focus on because they're telling a different story entirely in a sense. So if you want the best experience without having things spoiled, it's like kind of like, you know, the special cuts that people do for Star Wars, so you can avoid the Darth Vader spoiler, so you can have the Anakin stuff without knowing that it's going to be Darth Vader, right? It's a
Yeah, you
specific
watch
plot
the
point.
first two movies of the original trilogy, you have the, no, I am your father line, and then you immediately go back and watch the prequel so you can see how he became Darth Vader, and then you finally watch the final.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. Or you cut out the first movie, you don't watch the Phantom Menace at all, and then you watch the second and third movie.
It is wild that there is a cut, like a recommended viewing where it just cuts out the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's kind of, with Neon Genesis here, watching the anime is probably the best introduction spot because it gives you that intrigue aspect that's not really present in the other ones.
Yeah.
And then when you have the basis for a lot of the stuff, that's when I would do the other ones. And I would agree, it's do the anime, then do the end of Evangelion, then into the manga, and then into Rebuild. Because Rebuild feels very much like the ending of it all.
Hot take. You know what? Fucking magma hot take. Watch the anime, read the manga, then watch End of Evangelion, then watch the Rebuild series. Don't get the explanation of what instrumentality looks like at all until you've read the entire manga, and then you get to see what instrumentality looks like, and then you get to see what it would have looked like for the anime.
I mean, that works too. And the thing I like is you can put them in any order, and the person who's reading for the first time is still going to get blindsided by what happened with Asuka in either order.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, Asuka lived. She's going to be fine. Oh, God. Or Asuka died. I don't want to read this part. She lived. Holy shit.
Plus, the nice part about doing it in that order is End of Evangelion already has that nice recap of, I know you just read the manga, here's exactly what happened in the anime for you as like a little recap.
The only thing I would say is a problem with that is End of Evangelion ends with the beach scene.
It's true.
Whereas the manga ends with him resetting the universe. Which I think resetting the universe sets you up better for Rebuild if it was just what you went through. Whereas End of Evangelion, the movie, is more of a nothing changed aspect.
Yeah, we're in the same world, but things are different. But honestly, I would argue, so resetting the world sets you up better for Rebuild in the sense of, like, you get that idea that it resets. But End of Evangelion and showing them walk up on the beach gives you the better understanding of, like, the sea being red and, like, the crucifix shadow on the hill in fucking Rebuild. So, like...
you can do, honestly, in either order. I think that's the one spot that preference takes hold.
I think I have decided my favorite. I was joking when I said that, but the more I think about it, the more I think that would actually work. Is watching the anime, reading the manga, and then watching anime.
Yeah.
Really fuck some people up with the reveal of what happens to Asuka.
It's downward trending for Asuka in this order.
Yeah, that's true. It definitely gets worse for Asuka the further you go in this system.
Which I think takes us into our next question here, which is pretty good. In your opinions, which version of Asuka is the best? Or has the most tragic story?
Well, I think I've kind of now covered my opinions on that matter. Not just which one is the most dramatic, but kind of in order. I think manga Asuka is probably arguably the least dramatic.
Yeah.
End of Evangelion is medium dramatic, and then Rebuild is probably, in my opinion, the most dramatic, because, as I said on our post, but just to flesh out my idea a little bit, Rebuild Asuka not only has most of the Asuka trauma that you expect from all of the other versions, she also gets the Toji trauma from being inside Bardiel, and then also gets the Angel trauma of having Bardiel be inside of her after that fact. Like, she gets all the trauma.
Yeah, I agree. Rebuild Asuka goes through the most trauma, but I think she also, if you're looking at purely the endings, she's probably got the second best ending.
That's true. We can agree End of Evangelion has the worst ending for Asuka.
It's got the worst ending for everybody.
It's true. No one really has a happy ending in End of Evangelion.
So then we got another question here. What is your favorite ship?
So I tried to think about this in series. I legitimately tried to think of which of the relationships I shipped the hardest. And the more I thought about it, I kept coming back to the obvious answer, which is the Japanese aircraft carrier Katsuragi, for which Misato is named. It is the best ship.
Yeah. Now, I did have an answer for this question. I was like, well, Kaji Misato is like the best relationship in the series. Clearly, it's got to be that one. But I do really like your answer.
It's the best ship.
I'm upset. I didn't think of the question that way. So we got another one here. What do you think Mari adds or detracts from the story? Which is an interesting question, because I feel like Mari is one of the characters in the franchise that is very controversial. And there's always a disagreement about her.
That's a difficult one. For what Mari adds to the story. I don't know. I keep going back and forth on this one, where my initial gut reaction is like she doesn't add a huge amount to change the plot or the narrative and how it grows that much. I feel that, well...
I would disagree. I think Mari actually has a lot on narrative changes to the story, but she's not a front and center character that does this. I feel like her existence in itself changes Evangelion, and this is kind of going into the wider thing, but the reason we call it Rebuild of Evangelion, because it's never officially been called Rebuild, but Ono said that what the plan with the movies, they're called Shin Evangelion, is the actual name.
Sure.
The whole idea is to break what is Evangelion in a way that's breaking the loop of the story. Because every time the story was told, it always followed the exact same beats, essentially. The manga did it. Even the spin-off stories follow the same beats as the core Evangelion. So this was the plan to break that apart to like better understand it and what's the logical way forward if you change it. And Mari's whole existence is built around she's adding a foreign substance is being added into the story that doesn't click into the story as neatly. So to add it, you kind of have to break it.
Yeah, the argument could be made that what she adds to the story is enough changes to force Rebuild to play out differently than the original manga or anime did, or any of the spin-off series. I just feel, personally at least, that the main purpose she serves is in my opinion, she stands as a kind of an audience stand-in where, like, a lot of people, and not even, like, true Evangelion fans, but, like, the casual people who watched the anime and didn't really, like, pay that much attention or were like, this is weird, this isn't what I think this would be like. She's that character of, like, she's the person who's like, I feel like it would just be fun to pilot an Eva and fight angels.
Yeah.
And so she just has fun fighting angels while piloting an Eva.
Yeah.
She's that character to me, and it's showing how even that character doesn't fully stop trauma from happening in the story. Trauma still happens, she just has a different impact on it.
Yeah. And ultimately, if you want to get a truest sense of what ultimately her purpose in the story was, I do agree, like, the worst thing about Mari is she just kind of got sidelined, unfortunately, when I think we could have had a lot more of her that would have done a better job fleshing her out. But ultimately, she's the person that does end up bringing Shinji back from the brink, is the best way to put it. She literally does it, but it's also like the metaphorical of, like, Shinji was willing to sacrifice himself to save everyone else, and Mari is the only person who was able to get him, essentially, and bring him back. Which, if it was any other character in Evangelion, no one has ever had the ability to pull someone back in Evangelion.
Not a skill anyone has.
No.
Everyone's too busy dealing with their own shit to try and pull someone else back.
And whether you're a person who, like, thinks that, you know, Mari and Shinji are together, or, you know, they're just working together, whatever, blah, 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 I think ultimately her purpose in the story is to save Shinji at the end.
Yeah, I can accept that. So, I still think my main stance is she exists to represent all the people watching Evangelion and being like, why isn't this more like my favorite mecha anime? Why aren't they having fun while doing this? Why does everyone have to be so goddamn sad? And she's the character of, like, here you go, you got your fucking one character who's not so sad about everything. But at the same time, she also seems to, I agree, she fills the role of being a character who can pull Shinji back from beyond the end. And
yeah, ultimately, she does not fit in Evangelion, thus Evangelion must change.
Yeah. This is what happens when you take one of those mecha anime pilots and put them into Evangelion. You force Evangelion to change to fit the mecha anime pilot.
Yeah. For another fun question here we got, how did we come up with the idea of the podcast?
I can answer this one for you, Keith, because you have your own idea of how we came up for this podcast. And what happened is Rebuilds 3.0 plus 1.0, is that what
you just say Thrice Upon a Time?
Thrice Upon a Time, yeah. Thrice Upon a Time came out, and Keith did not know how to emotionally deal with the fact that Evangelion was theoretically over at that point, and thus has forced me to live out his dream of continuing Evangelion for approximately 2 years at this point.
Just wait till we get into the fan fiction episodes where I start making you read my fan fiction.
Yeah, it's not even actual fan. It's you're the fan in the titular fan fiction. It's just your personal fiction.
This is the new character I added to the story named Peter.
Yeah. He exists to suffer.
But yeah, that pretty much sums up, like, Evangelion, it was very much like, this is the ending of Evangelion, regardless of new stuff coming out. That it felt like how a lot of people felt after Avengers Endgame. Like, this is, like, the end of, like, everything was building to this is what the feeling was. Yeah. It's like, I don't know anyone in person I talked to Evangelion about.
And you consider just...
Ultimately, I just want to talk about the movie, but there's so much context you need to have before you get to that point.
And that's, like, the key thing is, for those of you who don't know, me and Keith and another friend of ours did a different podcast before, like, when we first started pairing Evangelion. We were already doing a different podcast, which has since ended for its own reasons. But Keith just wanted to do an episode about Evangelion for that podcast, and me and the other guy were like, we don't even really know Evangelion that well. I don't know how well we could do an episode about that. And so you're like, fuck it, you're going to learn about Evangelion, and we're going to document the entire goddamn process.
And that's the true sense. Ultimately, I wanted to talk about Thrice Upon a Time, but backstory was needed. Context is very important.
We're still learning context. I assume we're going to go back to Thrice Upon a Time at some point.
I mean, the home release is...
That's true, with the additional content.
Yeah, so, very good chance.
Very good chance we'll end up going to Thrice Upon a Time again.
And let's do one more question here. So the last one I have is, how can one better understand the dynamics of the shows after End of Evangelion? What are the best sources for information?
This fucking podcast.
I suppose. We've had a few of those just going into the deep stuff episodes.
Yeah. Also, this is definitely the best source. If you don't want to know the actual lore, but our specific headcanon, then this is the only source for that information. But if you want like actual lore, I don't know. There's probably like a PS2 game that had like weird documents that you could read.
Well, that's specifically literally to date, what is considered the best lore source in the whole thing is the PlayStation 2 game, because in the game you're able to access SEELE secret files, which gives you information that is not present anywhere else.
I was fucking joking, Keith. You can't just pull out a Uno reverse. That's actually the correct answer. A PS2 game.
It is though. Now, of course, the main problem is the game was only ever in Japanese, so it's mainly secondhand translations that a lot of people have. But up to this point, you have to remember, we knew nothing about SEELE or like the Dead Sea Scrolls or anything about what SEELE was doing up to this point. So when the PlayStation 2 game came out, and essentially you get the other side of the story, it was the biggest lore dump that's ever happened to date.
Of course it was.
I mean, if you want to get very serious, like the Evangelion wiki is probably your best. But I'm assuming you want to consume the stuff in like a narrative aspect.
Yeah, the Evangelion wiki is gonna do the fun part of playing all these video games and then compiling the information together for you. But if you want to discover yourself, do that. Then also definitely do the Shinji Ikari Racing Project, because there's very important lore hidden in that as well.
Yeah, Daddy Gendo.
Yeah, Daddy Gendo. You wouldn't know about Daddy Gendo if you didn't play that. It's the one universe where Gendo unironically, fully enthusiastically loves his son.
Yep. And is strong enough to punch Ramiel and crack it.
Yep.
For his son.
It's a simulation, but still, it happens and it works. It's also one of the few series you can consume of Evangelion and just feel joy the entire time.
Yep.
No sadness. But yeah, probably play that PS2 game. There's probably also like dating sims that have additional information. Like, didn't Mana get introduced in one of the dating sim games?
Yeah, Girlfriend of Steel.
Girlfriend of Steel. So like, play that so you can learn about Mana. Okay. Not exactly a hugely important canon character, but you want extra information, play Girlfriend of Steel.
Yep. And that's the ultimate thing. It's, as we've discussed earlier in this podcast episode as well, there's the core 3, which is the basis for everything, and anything else you read in the Evangelion is going to build on top of that.
Yeah. Supplemental information. Perhaps not necessary for your understanding, but adds extra depth.
Yeah, with that, I think that wraps up everything we had planned for this episode, specifically.
Don't forget, Angels are aliens.
Oh, yeah.
Important thing to note.
That's my check-in for every episode from this point.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and Angels are aliens, remember that.
It's been a while since we've officially said that on the podcast. If someone's jumping ahead and didn't listen to our earlier episodes, I think it's important to remind people, now that we're discussing kind of where we're at, angels are in fact aliens.
It's true.
But, like, not in the sense you think.
Yeah.
And a slightly twisted different sense.
Move it slightly to the left, that's what we're thinking.
Yeah. Although, from that same argument, humans are also aliens. Congrats, you're an alien.
Yeah, it's pretty good, I guess.
Alright, you can wrap up now. I got my point out.
So, if you'd like to reach out to the podcast, you can always send us an email at whatismypodcastabout@gmail.com. Of course, these episodes go up every Wednesday on all podcasting platforms, as well as YouTube. So like, favorite, subscribe, leave a review. Word of mouth is definitely the best way to spread the podcast to new people, so please keep that up. On top of that as well, we have the Instagram page, Farewell Evangelion, where we update with facts, tidbits, and just information about the series as we go along, keeping it canon, or up to line with the spoilers of where we're at in the episodes. So follow along there. And, as always, Peter, what can we expect on the next episode of Farewell Evangelion?
Fan theories, fan emotions, fan recaps, fan service.
plenty of it too.